Smokey Yunick wasn't merely an auto technician. He was a brilliant strategist who operated in the ambiguous zones of NASCAR's regulations. Some labeled him a rule breaker, while others hailed him as a visionary. However, the 13 clever maneuvers he executed left an indelible mark on NASCAR, one they neither overlooked nor pardoned. Back in 1967, Smokey Yunick unveiled what appeared to be a completely factory-standard Chevrolet Chevelle. From a casual glance, it mirrored the showroom model precisely, aligning perfectly with NASCAR's stringent requirements. Yet, Smokey wasn't one to rely solely on superficial compliance. He had ingeniously miniaturized the vehicle through delicate artistry, reducing the exterior panels by tiny increments, subtly dropping the roof height, refining the windshield incline, and slimming the overall width. Individually, these alterations were barely perceptible, but collectively, they reshaped the Chevelle into a more streamlined, rapid, and wind-resistant beast. During that era, scrutineers relied on basic tools like measuring tapes, rulers, and personal judgment to evaluate vehicles. Smokey understood their constraints intimately. He crafted the Chevelle so that each dimension teetered right on the edge of acceptability according to NASCAR standards. To the authorities, it cleared the checks. To competing squads, it raised eyebrows of doubt. And during competitions, it proved unbeatable. Pilots insisted the machine sliced through the atmosphere uniquely, cruising along the straightaways at velocities no ordinary production car could achieve. As rumors of Smokey's feat circulated, NASCAR reacted with alarm. They swiftly prohibited the Chevelle and overhauled their guidelines for body dimensions to enforce greater accuracy. But the impact was irreversible. The legend of Smokey's rebellious Chevelle emerged, celebrated by enthusiasts as the most intelligent deception in NASCAR lore. Regulators deemed it a scandal. Nonetheless, even they conceded that Smokey Yunick had engineered what many continue to regard as the most illicit automobile the discipline had witnessed. When NASCAR imposed a maximum capacity of 22 gallons on fuel reservoirs, the majority of outfits complied without question. Smokey Yunick refused to conform. Rather than expanding the container outright, he ingeniously converted the fuel conduit into a concealed surplus storage. By elongating it beyond 11 feet and broadening its diameter sufficiently to accommodate nearly 5 additional gallons, Smokey fashioned a supplementary fuel supply, masquerading as mere piping. It was elegantly straightforward, profoundly sly, and remarkably potent, evading initial detection by overseers. During events, this ploy bestowed a substantial edge upon Smokey's machines. As adversaries veered into refueling stops, his vehicle persisted in lapping the circuit relentlessly, accruing vital seconds. Eventually, examiners uncovered the ruse and erupted in indignation. They extracted the fuel reservoir, believing they had unmasked Smokey's most egregious violation. Yet, the true brilliance lay not merely in the extended range, but in exploiting a regulatory omission. The NASCAR guidelines nowhere stipulated restrictions on the length or girth of fuel conduits. Smokey had adhered to the explicit wording of the statutes, even as he demolished their underlying purpose. This solitary breakthrough compelled NASCAR to revise its directives concerning fuel mechanisms, solidifying Smokey's status as the individual capable of intellectually surpassing the entire racing establishment. The confrontation ensuing from Smokey's fuel conduit controversy evolved into a storied episode in NASCAR annals. Examiners, certain they had ensnared him at last, removed the fuel reservoir from his Chevelle and designated it as proof. Absent the reservoir, they presumed the vehicle was inoperable. Verdict rendered. However, Smokey possessed a final ace. He settled into the cockpit, ignited the ignition, and awakened the power plant. To the astonishment of all observers, the Chevelle thundered alive. Smokey engaged the transmission and piloted the machine away sans an installed fuel reservoir. The vehicle harbored sufficient gasoline within that elongated 11-foot conduit to sustain operation, rendering the examiners appear ridiculous. Smokey amplified the humiliation. Folklore recounts him protruding from the portal and jesting, "You'd best reinstall that reservoir." 9 gallons remained in the conduit. Regardless of the quip's veracity, the anecdote proliferated rapidly. Smokey had publicly embarrassed the authorities, demonstrating globally that NASCAR's regulatory framework paled against his ingenuity. Theoretically, all NASCAR chassis during the 1960s were mandated to exhibit symmetry. Practically, Smokey Yunick discerned that perfect balance was superfluous, particularly on elliptical circuits where vehicles predominantly veered leftward. Thus, he conceived the asymmetrical frame. Through discretely displacing the structure laterally, Smokey reallocated the vehicle's mass, enhancing tire adhesion during leftward maneuvers. The outcome was profound: superior traction, enhanced equilibrium, and swifter navigation through bends. To an untrained viewer, the machine appeared conventional. To Smokey's operators, it maneuvered enchantingly. Adversaries protested vehemently, yet NASCAR lacked a clause outright forbidding it. Once more, Smokey inhabited the nebulous realm. Ultimately, authorities amended the frame stipulations to seal the gap. But prior to that, Smokey's skewed vehicles earned notoriety for clinging to the pavement in manners unattainable by peers. It exemplified his brilliance anew. Smokey didn't merely construct swift vehicles, he fabricated intellectually superior ones. And whenever NASCAR believed they had cornered him, he unearthed another oversight in the directives. Protective roll bars were intended solely for safeguarding operators. But under Smokey Yunick's manipulation, they transformed into something extraordinarily astute. Smokey deduced that employing marginally oversized pipes allowed him to repurpose segments of the roll bar into clandestine fuel compartments. Externally, it resembled routine protective apparatus. Internally, it concealed invaluable gallons of gasoline undetectable to scrutineers. This stratagem extended his vehicle's endurance and minimized refueling halts, which in competitive contexts frequently determined triumph or setback. The ingenuity resided in its unassuming facade. Examiners perceived metallic conduits fused into the structure. Smokey envisioned untapped volume ripe for utilization. He camouflaged his advancement under the pretext of protection, and temporarily, no one discerned. When NASCAR ultimately did, the backlash was swift. Protective gear was inviolable. Exploiting it deceptively struck many as transgressing an unspoken boundary. But to Smokey, it constituted another exploit. If unprohibited, then permissible, he dismissed. NASCAR retaliated by refining mandates, dictating pipe dimensions, and prescribing any elements capable of containing fuel. Smokey forfeited the exploit, yet secured the mythos. Production vehicle competition revolved around atmospheric circulation, and Smokey comprehended fluid dynamics prior to most squads grasping the concept. He ascertained that by minutely elevating the ceiling by mere slivers or depressing the undercarriage faintly, he could revolutionize the vehicle's silhouette. The consequence: diminished resistance, superior steadiness, and a machine that outwitted the breeze while appearing utterly factory issue. The mastery lay in the finesse. To overseers, the vehicles satisfied every metric. To pilots, they sensed silkier, hastier, and more anchored at elevated velocities. Competitors frequently harbored suspicions, but Smokey's adjustments were so infinitesimal, often mere millimeters, that substantiating them verged on impossibility. This methodology underscored Smokey's fixation on minutiae disregarded by others. While rivals pursued unrefined engine potency, he pursued imperceptible advantages in metallic sheeting and structural contours. NASCAR ultimately intensified scrutiny with rigorous molds and exterior evaluations. But by that juncture, Smokey had validated a principle enduring in competition: fluid dynamics secure victories equivalently to motors. The Holley fuel mixer was uniform gear in NASCAR. Superficially, all contingents utilized identical components. But Smokey discerned loci for concealed propulsion. He perfected the craft of infinitesimal fuel mixer alterations, refining interiors, calibrating nozzles, modulating streams in manners so delicate that examiners scarcely identified them. Visually, the fuel mixer seemed pristine. To the power plant, it inhaled more efficiently, yielding augmented force and fluid accelerator feedback. Adversaries vowed Smokey had unearthed sorcery beneath the bonnet. In truth, it was painstaking artisanship. Examiners progressively dismantled fuel mixers to their tiniest elements, hunting for Smokey's signatures. But by then, the harm was inflicted. His refined mixers afforded his pilots supplementary leverage in pivotal instances. And anew, NASCAR scrambled to barricade an unforeseen vulnerability. Smokey's fuel mixer exploits illuminated his broader acumen. He didn't perpetually pursue ostentatious exploits. Occasionally, he unearthed velocity in realms so diminutive that most never deigned to inspect. And in competition, those minuscule superiorities frequently tipped the scales. In NASCAR, each ounce was critical. Smokey Yunick recognized that a featherweight vehicle surged quicker, navigated superiorly, and preserved cooler rubber across extended spans. But NASCAR's directives fixed fuel reservoir volume at 22 gallons. No excess, no deficit. Smokey couldn't modify the quantity. What he could alter was the mass. Hence, he fabricated slender-walled fuel containers. Visually, they mirrored the norm. Examiners gauged the proportions and approved Sand's reluctance. But Smokey's containers employed lighter substances, trimming vital ounces without compromising capacity. On the circuit, those ounces equated to swifter circuits, hastier departures from halts, and superiority over rivals. The astuteness of the tactic resided in its concealment. Competitors could decry impropriety, but absent dissecting the container, they couldn't corroborate. And Smokey flourished on that precarious boundary, compliant by gauge, defiant by design. Ultimately, authorities comprehended when they realized Smokey had tampered with something as mundane as a fuel container. NASCAR enforced mass thresholds and substance limitations. But by that point, Smokey had capitalized on the benefit and once more disgraced the regulators. Smokey's fascination with atmospheric dynamics verged on artistry. He grasped that a power plant's efficacy wasn't solely ingress, but seamless transit through the machine. He commenced trials with apertures, channels, and obscured pathways that posed as commonplace attributes but covertly revolutionized circulation. Certain channels supplied chilled atmosphere to the motor, mitigating thermal excess and extracting propulsion. Others deftly regulated flow encircling the vehicle's exterior, curtailing resistance and disturbance. He even masked apertures as ornamental accents, elements overseers disregarded as aesthetic, yet every modification aimed to pair minuscule seconds per revolution. Rivals couldn't decipher it. Smokey's machines appeared to operate cooler, endure lengthier, and pierce the breeze more pristinely. On sweltering afternoons when motors seethed and decelerated, his vehicles persisted in advancing. Operators perceived the disparity even absent visibility. Examiners were anew pursuing phantoms. This unyielding emphasis on atmospheric orchestration preceded its era by generations. Contemporary NASCAR vehicles are sculpted via aerodynamic tunnels and computational simulations. Smokey accomplished it via intuition, shears, and rudimentary markings. Amongst Smokey Yunick's inventions, one loomed as fabled, the renowned Golden Vehicle. Competitors affirmed it was the most polished, exquisitely calibrated apparatus ever to grace pavement. It wasn't merely rapid, it appeared excessively impeccable. The paneling conformed more snugly. The sections aligned impeccably. Even its posture on the track seemed anomalous, as if aerodynamically optimized years before NASCAR contemplated such. No one could substantiate precisely Smokey's alterations. Some conjectured concealed panel displacements. Others murmured about clandestine channeling or modified axle spacing. Smokey never divulged. All he conceded was that the vehicle resided in the most ambiguous of ambiguous zones, leveraging every indistinct clause in the guidelines. NASCAR loathed it. Competitors abhorred it. But aficionados adored it. To them, the golden vehicle wasn't deception. It was mastery. It epitomized Smokey's essence, a readiness to intellectually dominate, construct superiorly, and outlast the regime. Ultimately, NASCAR terminated it. But not before the golden vehicle ascended to mythology, an icon of the renegade ethos defining Smokey Yunick. Even epochs later, squads murmur of it as competition's sacred artifact. The machine that demonstrated creativity could surpass propulsion in peril. In NASCAR, counterweights, the supplementary mass for equilibrium, were required to be fastened and uniform. But Smokey Yunick perceived not mere lead blocks. He envisioned prospects. He experimented with concealing counterweights in atypical locales, nestled within structural beams posing as integral components or positioned to grant enhanced command over maneuverability. One of Smokey's most astute conceptions was relocatable counterweights. Narratives suggest he devised mass that could relocate or even discard amid competition. Envision commencing heavily for adhesion, then covertly shedding mass midway for amplified velocity. Rivals couldn't validate, but they insisted Smokey's machine altered demeanor as events progressed, clinging fiercely in curves initially, then soaring along straights when crucial. NASCAR ultimately banned anything akin to adjustable mass. Presently, counterweights must affix via designated fixtures. That's the Smokey influence. His breakthroughs were so extravagant that whole regulatory segments exist due to him. To Smokey, it wasn't violation, it was tactics. To NASCAR, it was turmoil.